afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us for what we feel is obviously a very timely topic, and not just our business, but essentially almost every business on the planet, which is that of financial fraud and security awareness. And based on the weather in Calgary today, the online format certainly seems very appropriate. So, over the next hour, you will hear from Adam Elliott, who's the president and CEO of IA Private Wealth. And he'll touch on what the firm is doing from a data protection standpoint and even changes that have recently been made. Myself, Kevin Hawkinson, on the importance of the know Your Client or KYC function. Steve Ambo and Mike Brintnell on the topic of online security. Jay Du Bois on the importance and role of TCP or Trusted Contact Person. And time permitting, Holly Frost on the role and relevance of T1 and T2 compliance. We're really honored that Adam Elliott, the president and CEO of IA Private Wealth, could join us today. Adam is a wealth management industry veteran with over 25 years of experience and joined IA Private Wealth as president in April of 2023. Prior to joining IAPW, Adam was president and CEO of IA Clarington Investments, and prior to that, spent 18 years in a progressively senior roles at Dynamic Funds. He's responsible for the firm's critical growth strategies and is dedicated to ensuring IAPW advisors have the tools, resources, and support they need to deliver consistently exceptional client service, which includes data protection. I've had the pleasure of knowing Adam for the bulk of his career, so can firsthand speak to his client-first passion for our business. Adam, please take the floor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kevin, and thanks, Jay, Mike, and Steve and Holly for inviting me on today. And thank you all very much for being clients of IA Private Wealth. I will start off by saying that when I got this role a few years ago, I did not expect to spend nearly as much time as I have dealing with cybersecurity issues and dealing with a large number of attempted frauds and spending considerable budget on reinforcing the defenses that we have across all our systems. And we're continually, as I'm sure you are, working and in our case, investing to try and stay one step ahead of these fraudsters, essentially. Wanted to sort of just, talking about some of the things that we've done. So first of all, as a word of comfort, your advisors and all our advisors have something called errors and E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance, which includes cybersecurity protection. So if something does happen on our systems, there is insurance coverage that takes place. I can tell you that that is becoming more expensive for the dealer and our advisors, as the insurers or the reinsurers in this case recognize that these threats are becoming more frequent, and I can tell you we're continually blocking various attempts, phishing attempts. But I would say the fraudsters are getting smarter. They're starting to use AI in their capabilities, and so the bar is continually being raised, and it's certainly something that's top of mind. And I would also say that it's vitally important that you work with advisors that, hopefully, obviously staying at our firm, but you need to be, I think, with a large firm that can put these defenses in place, which I think is important because they are significant investments. I also wanted to, and I was talking to the group beforehand, just give you a couple of examples and some of the questions we struggle with a little bit. I mean, we want as much as possible to be easy to do business with. And so if you think of things like if you use our client portal or our mobile app, it used to be that you put in your password and once a month you might get a thing ticking up asking for a 6-digit authentication. We've had to now increase the number of times that you get checked to verify the number sent to your cell phone. Now I would say now best practice is not every 30 days, but every 7 days. And sometimes we hear feedback from clients or from our advisors saying clients find that irritating. And I also found it irritating. But it is, I would say, just the new reality that we're continually having to do updates, also make sure that we add in those protections. Just to sort of give you a sense of some of the frauds that we've seen attempted at the dealer recently and what we've done to combat them. One thing that's happened, a couple of times recently, we were brought in new measures is, when fraudsters get access to your email address or just your name and address, sending in change of address details, but something that really worries us is change of banking information. And we've had a couple of attempts where people have sent through change of banking information. We used to just accept it if it was faxed through or emailed through from our advisors. Now we have a policy that any client looking to change their banking information, we have to call back, speak to your advisor in person to confirm that yes, they indeed are trying to change your banking information. That's one of the common scams. If they can change your banking information, then they get a request for transfers in. Obviously, highly dangerous. We haven't lost money in those ways, but we're continually following cases, speaking to the regulators, talking to other firms as well of what frauds are being attempted. So just an example of things where we're bringing in additional protections for you. The other thing I would say is that the insurance that covers everything that takes place by a private wealth account, but we are hearing horror stories of things impacting clients outside their private wealth accounts, right? And so we are also spending a lot of time trying to educate our advisors on these sort of romance scams, some of the horrors that take place, some of the things around estate, some of the challenges, and it can sometimes make for a more challenging client experience. So things like estate settlements, for example, are sometimes taking a bit longer now than they used to in the past because of all the checks we're needing to make sure that we are following the right instructions, that it's a valid will, powers of attorney in place, all those kind of things. So I think in many ways, technology is making your experience as a client much better and faster and easier access to information. But at the same time, we're needing to make sure that we bring in the right checks and balances to make sure that your assets are secure with us. So that was it for me, Kevin, unless you had any questions you wanted to ask me to address specifically.
No, no, I think that's perfect, Adam, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's a balancing act between that irritation factor, but also making sure that everything is well protected from a dealer standpoint and us from the advisor end standpoint as well. So sometimes it's an irritant to the dealer, sometimes it's to us, sometimes it's to the client, but it's all for the better good of making sure that data slash financial assets and everything is well protected. So appreciate your time, Adam, and thanks so much for joining us and kicking this off right now.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me in, and thank you all for your continued work with the Clear Sky team. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, so I'll move on then, and I'm just going to discuss briefly the importance of the Know Your Client process or KYC. So it's a data and information gathering process that we're doing with each and every one of you. It's interactions that we have, and you've probably never heard of us call it KYC or Know Your Client, but it's something as we interact with you. Each and every time, whether it's phone or in person, we're always gathering data. I think sometimes, and Adam called it an annoyance or an irritance. I think another word I would use is sometimes it maybe feels a little invasive asking, consistently for things like, liquid net worth, fixed net worth, where does a deposit come from, or why are you taking a withdrawal? Just to mention a few, of some of the annoyances for data we're collecting. But just always know it's not just from a high service standpoint where we're trying to always pinpoint what's best for you, but it's also from a protection standpoint. So by definition, KYC, Know Your Client, from a regulatory standpoint, is basically a process to verify a client's identity, assess their risk profile, and understand the nature of their financial activities. For us as advisors, what it really is, it's a function that helps us do a better job to help clients through their financial journey, but also to help prevent financial fraud and other mishappenings that can happen along the way as well. So just very briefly, what does KYC typically involve? And I'm just going to brush over a few things here. Identity verification. I mean, you obviously know if you open a bank account or you come to us, we're going to collect things like name, address, dates of birth, government issued ID, SIN numbers, so you can get a tax slip where applicable. In the process, it's important for us to understand the full situation. But even thinking just further beyond that from a standpoint of what we're also looking for is it could also identify maybe you're a tax reporter in a couple different areas, which may treat how we deal with you in a little bit of a different manner. We do client due diligence. Of course, in that process, we're doing things like source and placement of wealth and any changes. So, in order to understand the situation to assess items like risk capacity, it's important for us to understand the entire picture, as of course, this plays an important role in the way we may recommend a service or an investment to you. Or even some of the simple things, such as making sure that we don't overcontribute to a TFSA, can be learned through a process like figuring out the placement of wealth and sources. Um, Occupation and changes. So it's important for us to learn how you make a living, where your source of funds come from for current cash flow, and to assess how to create a savings plan to aid in future cash flow needs, such as purchasing a new property or the eventual goal of retirement. And of course, everything we do in this process as well is a risk assessment. So, it can also change how we may eventually end up investing your money. Investment knowledge and experience. So understanding the investment journey that each client has had, prior to joining us, also helps us understand what type of investment situations you may have witnessed, and shapes your view on what the investment landscape looks like and how you feel about it. Also, there's certain investments where a level of investment knowledge may be needed for us to include something in your portfolio. We assess time horizon. Of course, this can be a very crucial factor. It basically plays a big difference in the risk exposure that a client could potentially take, if they're investing for a short period, like, a year or two versus, say, 10 years. But from the risk standpoint, knowing things like time horizon also helps us learn, what, say, a reasonable pattern of withdrawals you may take. And a financial plan also aids in that as well. And, if we see irregularities, frequently in those withdrawals, it, helps us maybe spot a potential fraud or some kind of exploitation. We discuss things like trusted contact person, or TCP, through the KYC process. And Jay's going to discuss that further. But literally everything in the KYC process aids in the TCP function by allowing us to know, our clients very well, what their habits are, just simple things like I said, even understanding what a normal withdrawal habit may be from a client, and changes month over month to that process. So, that's just a very brief overview of KYC. And when you look at sort of the pros and cons, if we look at drawbacks, everything we collect, could create what we'll say is a privacy concern. We have your name, we have your SIN numbers, we have your dates of birth, your address, all those sorts of things. So you are sharing sensitive data with us, which is why some of these processes that are in place are so utterly important to protect that data. And that data is very important because we need that to do the best job that we can for you as well. Of course, a drawback as well is time and friction, and I'll say that's from your end, and from our end, and from the dealer's end. Manual processes can delay, account openings. It seems frustrating to some clients, again, that we, on an ongoing basis, have to continue to ask for details. And just so you know, from a regulatory standpoint, if you're in a managed account, we have to basically know every single KYC detail every single year. If you're in a non-managed account, the regulatory requirement is every 3 years. Now, when we look at some of the values of this KYC function, first and foremost, it can help us protect against fraud and identity theft. So verified systems make it harder for imposters to open accounts. And like Adam mentioned, even additional things are getting put in place, like, more check verification processes from us as well. So, in your name, or misusing information, and the better we know you, the better we can help verify that information. And of course, there's digital checks and balances as well that use your information, and help spot, potential irregularities as well. The process, of course, from our standpoint, aids in suitability of advice and products. So collecting all the data we need to helps aid in recommendations that are suitable, reduces the chance you'll maybe be steered into an inappropriate financial product or investment. And all these things help create a safer ecosystem. So your benefit from a financial system which is less vulnerable to criminals, of course, supports stability, better rates, services, and confidence in the whole financial process and institutions. And of course, it helps personalize services. So accurate profiling can lead to more relevant offerings such as customized investment portfolios and financial plans. So yes, we have to collect the data. Yes, we need the data to make sure we're doing the best job that we can for all of our clients. And everybody's data is a little bit different. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. So then we, kind of switch gears to what's the best process, what's the best safety checks that we can put in place to basically make sure that data is secure. Now, the good news is, I know, AI seems like a fairly new thing to most people. Is some modern solutions like biometrics, some AI-driven verifications, digital ID checks, things like that continue to evolve in the business. Does reduce some of the KYC burdens and create a little bit more of an accurate and I'll say less intrusive and hopefully further less intrusive process while maintaining and tightening security along the way as well. I'll now hand it over to Steve and Mike to discuss some online security details.
Thanks, Kevin. So I'm going to share a few slides. Just allow me 1 second here. And these slides are really meant to give you a bit of an early warning system as to what sort of scams are out there and what to be aware of. And then I'll hand it off to Mike to talk a little bit about how to protect yourself in the event a scammer tries to contact you. The first thing I want to point out is that there are some really good resources around. I've noted a few here, but there are many more that are available online. And I think one of the best ways to protect yourself is just to know what some of these scams are and how they work. If you're aware of these things ahead of time, when someone contacts you, you'll just be a little more suspicious. And, in our experience, when someone contacts us who is being scammed, it can be a bit tough sometimes to convince them that that's what's happening. But I feel like if they had read some of these descriptions ahead of time, it'd make our job a little easier. In particular, I'd note the Edmonton Police Department has some pretty detailed descriptions of the various scams that are out there. So what are some of the warning signs? Well, the key takeaway here is that scammers can give off the appearance of legitimacy. So you have to be very careful, even with basic websites, but obviously with people contacting you by phone or email. One of the key things I like to mention to people is that there have been a number of breaches, data breaches, I should say, in Canada. And so there can be cases where scammers might have some of your personal information. And whether they're getting this from the CRA through a data breach or other investment entities, they will mention this personal information when they contact you as a way of appearing to be from a legitimate source. But just a warning to our clients, that does not necessarily make them legitimate. And I think being aware of the fact that your information is out there will allow you to take some precautions. One of the main ones being, checking with the team here at Clear Sky, or maybe checking a third-party site for something like a phone number to call back. I do want to mention that in addition to the security put in place by Industrial Alliance, or IA, Clear Sky does have its own third-party tech firm that provides additional monitoring and security. So we have dual-factor authentication on our side for all of our software. You probably notice this. I know when I get calls from clients asking for tax information, it always takes me a few minutes to answer just because I'm busy logging into the various systems. So we have a number of protections in place to help prevent scammers from getting a hold of your information. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have it already. So a couple tips and tricks here. I think the main takeaway from this slide is that someone who's legitimate is not going to ask you to make a payment using a gift card or a cryptocurrency. In the scams that we've seen, this is a common way of taking or requesting a payment. And so if you just have a personal policy of not paying using these methods, it's a key protection for you. So what are some of the scam types? And I've got a few slides that list them, but I think the main thing we're wanting to show with this is that they take almost any form. And all of these scammers have ways of appearing legitimate in all of these different, using all these different methods. Phishing was mentioned earlier in the webinar. In the training we take for online security, people are often noted as the key security breach. In other words, someone getting in touch with you and then asking some questions and gaining your trust in some way. It's not always necessarily just someone working in the background, to breach a computer. Being on the tax side, I've seen a lot of the CRA scams. So a lot of scammers contacting people mentioning they're from the CRA or really other regulatory agencies in our industry. So again, be careful. Just because someone's claiming to be from one of these places doesn't mean that they are. One of the key things to recognize in all of these scams is they usually try to create a sense of urgency. And so they're going to put a lot of pressure on you to act quickly because they need you to send them the funds in short order before they disappear. And so again, just kind of demonstrating the number of different scams. Charity scams is another one we've seen a few times. In addition to just fake charities being set up, there can be people intercepting funds to legitimate charities. So, especially if someone's reaching out to you asking for funds, feel free to get in touch with us. We've got a lot of training in this area, have seen a lot of these taking place, and can definitely offer some support. And I would say if you've got anybody who might be a little more vulnerable in your circle, in your family, definitely point them to some of these resources, because if they're aware that these things can happen to them, if they've seen some of these descriptions ahead of time, again, it's going to help them recognize it and especially help us convince them if it's actually happening. With that, I will pass it over to Mike to talk about the next steps if someone contacts you.
Thanks, Steve. So when it comes to the scams that are floating around and all the potentials for us being taken advantage of, you as the individual that's being contacted are the first and last line of defense. There are certain things that are out of our control. If a utility company that you do business with gets hacked and some of your personal information gets taken from them, there's not much you can do about that. But for some of these other scams where you're being contacted directly, there's a lot that you can do to potentially help ensure that you're not going to get taken advantage of. So 3 really quick things to just kind of remember whenever you're exposed to a circumstance like this is to stop, to check, and to talk. So when it comes to stopping, as Steve mentioned, a lot of these scams use a lot of pressure to get you to respond quickly and to potentially act without thinking it through. This could either come from being from a position of authority. You get a call from CRA or the police service, or someone's looking to evoke an emotional response. One of the common scams that's out there right now is with some of our elderly clients. They're getting phone calls from their grandchildren saying that they're in trouble and they need some money to get them out of it. My own mother was contacted about 3 years ago. She got a phone call from me saying that I was in trouble and I needed some money to get out of it. Now, a little disappointed that my mom didn't recognize my voice or that it wasn't my voice, but she did call me and asked to make sure everything was okay. And after going through it, we realized that this was, in fact, a scam. And my mother asked me what to do. And I said, well, the next time they call, bring up all the money that I owe you and start hammering me on when I'm going to pay it back. And so she did get the call and she did do this, and she never heard from these guys again. So when it comes to your personal information and your finances, even though the world's moving really fast, you have the right to move as slow as you're comfortable with. So some other things to kind of look at, as I said, is, and Steve's mentioned as well too, the sort of aggressive authority figures, CRA contacting you, saying that they want you to respond or get information from you or take payment from you. And if you do it quickly, then the consequences aren't going to be as severe. Or even if it's not a pressure tactic like this, probably one of the more older scams that we've seen that's been going around for 20, 30 years have been the limited time, act now, get involved, and there's going to be a tremendous windfall. A lot of these scams, if they look too good to be true, it likely is. So stopping and paying attention to what is happening and trying to think it through a little bit before you respond is really going to go a long way. Other important thing to do is checking or doing some background research on any solicitation that you've received. If you can figure out whether or not the contact is legitimate or not, obviously it's going to help avoid you being put into an unfortunate financial circumstance. So if you get a call from a bank or a financial institution identifying themselves as the fraud department or some other internal department, you can hang up on that person and contact that institution using information that hasn't been provided to you for ease or simplicity. On your bank card, there's the phone number for your bank. On the back of your credit card, there's a phone number for your credit card companies. If you've been contacted by an institution like that, you can contact them outside of the initial contact with them and try and verify that what you're being contacted about is in fact legitimate. If you receive an offer from a company that you're not familiar with or an organization you're not familiar with, pull up Google, do a search, look up the company's website, look for any other instances where people have said that this company has been used in a potential or for a potential fraudulent manner. We had one client that was contacted by a legitimate company about 3 or 4 weeks ago, asking if they wanted to sell their shares in a particular stock. And this company has done this a few times, and it's very, very difficult to find out who these guys actually are, but they will somehow get a list of employees that might have held shares from a particular company, say Suncor or TELUS, and you'll get an unsolicited offer to sell those shares at a price that is far below what the market value is or what the current asking price is. And for every 100 times that these guys reach out and do something like this that fails, all it takes is the one positive time that they're able to take advantage of someone to make it worth their while and continue to do this. So doing a little bit of background work on who it is that's contacting you, verifying that what they're contacting you about is legitimate, can help protect you against potentially losing money or losing your information. And then the last most important thing to consider is talking. There's a lot of fraud that's been going around out there, and much of it goes unreported because most people are embarrassed or they feel personally attacked or hurt by it, and they don't want to talk about it. People talking about what they're being exposed to or potentially where they might have had a misstep helps to ensure that the scammers aren't successful the next time. So, went too far. So if you do get contacted by an institution, probably the best thing that you can do is to reach out to the people that you know, the people that you trust, friends, family members, or your trusted advisory circle, and ask some questions. Like, I've received this phone call. It seems odd. What should I do? We had a client that contacted me just a couple of days ago from an investment company that is 100% legitimate, and just so happens they do own shares in. But it is very, very unusual for those investment companies to contact you, the investor, directly. If there's something important that needs to be relayed, they usually go through us. So in that sort of circumstance, this individual did call me up, and I was able to kind of say to them, this looks a little bit odd. Don't respond to this conversation, or don't respond to this call. So if you are exposed to something like this, talk, ask your friends, ask your family, ask your trusted advisory circles, get some feedback, and see if it makes sense for you to respond or whether you should not do so in its entirety. And one of the features that have recently been put in our industry is the ability for us to talk to some of those people in your life on your behalf. And that's the trusted contact person that Jay's going to talk about. It's a very important tool that we use, that if we think that you're being taken advantage of, it gives us a way of helping you by talking to somebody in your circle that potentially can do a welfare check on you. So with that, I will turn it over to Jay, and thank you very much for attending today.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Everyone, thanks for taking the time today. Yeah, I'm going to be spending a few minutes talking about something simple, but incredibly powerful when it comes to protecting financial well-being: designating a trusted contact person, often called a TCP, on your financial accounts. Let's start with a quick question, though. What would happen if your financial institution noticed something unusual, maybe a large withdrawal that doesn't make sense in your normal pattern, or if you were unable to reach you for an urgent issue? Who could they contact to help make sure that you're okay? That's exactly where a trusted contact person comes in. A trusted contact person is someone you authorize your financial institution to contact in specific situations. This does not give them control of your account. They can't make transactions, change investments, or access your money. Instead, they act as a point of contact if there are concerns about your well-being, possible financial exploitation, or simply if the institution can't reach you. Think of it as a safety net. Now, why is this important? First, it helps protect against fraud and financial abuse. Unfortunately, scams and exploitation, especially targeting older adults, are becoming more common. If a financial advisor or institution notices something that doesn't seem right, having a TCP allows them to reach out to someone you trust to help verify what's going on. Second, it helps in situations involving health or cognitive challenges. Life is unpredictable. If you're ever ill, injured, or experiencing memory issues, your TCP can help confirm your situation and assist in getting the right support involved. Third, it provides peace of mind. If you or your loved ones, it's a proactive step that says, if something's off, here's someone I trust to help. So who should you choose as your trusted contact person? Ideally, this should be someone you trust deeply: an adult child, a close friend, or even a professional like a lawyer or an accountant. The key is that this person is reliable, reachable, and has your best interests at heart. It's also important to talk to them before listing them. Make sure they understand what the role involves. They're not managing your money. They're simply a contact in case of concern. It's not that you can't list a spouse as a trusted contact person. In many cases, sometimes people do. But there are several reasons why it's often better to choose someone else. Here's why. 1, shared risk and exposure. Spouses often share finances, accounts, and even devices. If fraud or exploitation occurs, especially scams targeting couples, both spouses may be affected at the same time. In that situation, your financial institution may need to reach someone outside that shared circle. Second, availability issues. If something happens like illness, travel, or an emergency, your spouse may be unavailable or facing the same situation as you. A TCP is most useful when they are reachable and able to respond independently. 3, diminished objectivity. A TCP may be contacted when there are concerns about unusual behavior or potential cognitive decline. A spouse might not recognize or may be reluctant to acknowledge those changes. A more neutral third party can sometimes provide clearer insight. 4, potential for conflict or undue influence. In rare but important cases, financial institutions may suspect undue influence or financial abuse. If a spouse is involved in that situation, they wouldn't be an appropriate contact. Having someone else or listed provides an added layer of protection. And lastly, 5, redundancy is stronger protection. Think of a TCP like a backup contact. If your spouse is already deeply involved in your financial life, adding a second trusted contact person like an adult child, sibling, close friend creates more resilient safety net. Now, you might be wondering, how is this different from a power of attorney? That's a good question. A power of attorney is a legal arrangement that allows someone to act on your behalf in financial or legal matters. A trusted contact person, on the other hand, has no authority over your accounts. They are simply someone your financial institution can reach out to for information or support if needed. You can think of a TCP as an early warning system, while a power of attorney is a formal decision-making role. While most of our clients will have already set up TCPs over the last few years, some still have not. Setting up a trusted contact person is usually quick, easy. Most financial institutions will just ask for a name, phone number, possibly an email address, and you can often add or update this information at any time. And importantly, you remain in control. You can change or remove your TCP whenever you choose. Before I wrap up, there's 3 key takeaways here. First, a trusted contact person helps protect you from fraud and unexpected situations. Second, they do not have access or control over your money. And third, choosing a TCP is a simple step that can make a big difference in safeguarding your financial future. In closing, I just encourage everyone to take a few minutes after the session to review your accounts and consider adding a trusted contact person if you don't have one already added. And it's one of those small actions today that can prevent big things down the road. So yeah, from there, I'm done my part, Holly. I think we've got enough time to add a little bit of T1, T2 supervision. So I'll pass it over to Holly.
Great. Thanks, Jay. As you've heard, my name is Holly Frost, and my function here today is to talk a little bit about Tier 1, Tier 2 compliance, and I'll very likely be echoing a lot of what's already been said today and tying it together into that compliance role. My perspective today comes from 17 years in the financial industry across 3 firms, encompassing many roles, including having been licensed as a compliance supervisor with IROC. Before investing, I was a paralegal and primarily concerned with legal precedent and civil litigation. I currently hold the Chartered Investment Manager designation. And what that means in practical terms is that I've seen how the rules are written. I've seen how they can be broken. I've seen how they're enforced. And unfortunately, I have seen real-world fraud attempts unfold. I'd like to start with a simple idea how the Canadian investment system is built on trust, and it's supported by layers of verification, oversight, and that really ugly C word, compliance. Without those layers, fraud would be far more prevalent and damaging than it is today. Compliance itself is not just a regulatory requirement, but it is a protective framework. And as we've already heard, too many controls frustrate users. They frustrate us, they frustrate you guys. Too few controls will expose us to risk. The goal, dare I say it, is intelligent risk-based compliance. From my experience, the biggest challenge is balancing strong security controls with a smooth client experience. The more you understand how the system works, the better equipped you are to protect yourself and your assets moving forward. You've heard me mention, and a couple people mentioned T1 and T2 compliance. They're industry-specific terms. They sound technical. They're pretty straightforward. T1 compliance is the first line of defense. It's day-to-day oversight. It takes place at a branch level, so that's us. It includes things like Kevin talked about earlier, so verifying our client identity, what your usual business practices are, ensuring that trades are suitable for our clients, and monitoring any unusual transactions. So like Kevin mentioned, we get to know you. We know what your regular business practices are. If out of the blue one day you came in and said, I've received $7 million, but you refused to tell us where it came from, and you immediately wanted to turn it around, wire it to a third-party account in Dubai, that would be an unusual transaction for you, and it would raise some red flags. So it is our job to ask extra questions, even when they might be uncomfortable. T2 compliance is the second line of defense. It's usually at a higher level for us. It's at our head office, and it concerns itself more with trend analysis and independent review. It can include audits of our branch activity, pattern detection across a multiple number of accounts, more at a macro level, and investigations into potential misconduct by registrants of the industry. So that would be us, the advisors. Another critical concept that you've probably already heard about is AML, or anti-money laundering. That idea is that financial institutions in Canada are required to monitor for suspicious transactions, just like we are, to report large cash movements, identify politically exposed persons, and to maintain detailed records of all of that. Those measures are put in place to prevent the financial system from being used to move illicit funds, illicit being that they are sourced from terrorist activity, things like that. Why does any of this matter to you as an investor? It is because financial fraud succeeds only when one of these layers is ignored, circumvented, or manipulated. We've talked a little bit about how they do become manipulated. Fraud has evolved, though, and Adam did touch on this. It's evolved significantly over the past decade. It's not just weird phone calls anymore or sketchy emails. It can now include social engineering, account takeovers, insider threats, and synthetic identity fraud. Criminals have become a lot more organized, patient, and they're often technologically sophisticated. But they don't have to be. Like Mike mentioned, they often don't even have to hack systems. They're exploiting human behavior. They're counting on the fact that you're going to want to very quickly resolve any issue that comes up. Very frequently would be the urgency of a tone in an email. How can you avoid becoming played like that? And again, we've touched on this today. Some of the other things that may not have been mentioned, though, and these are normal. You hear this: never share your login credentials. However, you may not hear the most obvious. Sometimes someone can call you and claim to be from your financial institution. And the reality is that we're not allowed in this industry to ask you for your login information. So if somebody's calling purporting to be from your bank or from Clear Sky and they're asking you for that information, it is very likely not legitimate. So be cautious of anything that is urgent or has an emotional tenor to it, specifically when the request is involving money. Like Mike mentioned, verify through another channel. If it's an email, pick up the phone, call a trusted number, and make sure that whatever you're receiving is actually legitimate. Regularly review your account statements for any kind of activity that may not have been authorized by you. And like Kevin mentioned and Adam mentioned, this can be a little bit annoying, but do enable all available security features on your devices and within your applications. It is a small price to pay, that annoyance, rather than losing your identity or potentially your entire savings, particularly considering that fraud techniques are not the only thing evolving in this industry. Other things we need to take into consideration are regulatory changes that we need to navigate, technological advancements that we are still becoming familiar with, and global financial trends that we need to stay on top of. Some ways that compliance has evolved to keep up with those. I know Kevin and Adam have mentioned AI, but artificial intelligence is now being used to detect unusual transaction patterns, and that helps because it can be caught more on a macro level. A room full of compliance officers wouldn't be able to catch some things now that AI is catching. Cybersecurity frameworks are updated regularly, so data encryption on the back end is becoming a lot more difficult to navigate if your intention is nefarious. Regulatory bodies are also adjusting rules constantly based on the emerging risks. So what you can and should expect from any financial firm that you're dealing with is clear communication about the risks that are involved, transparency in your reporting and documentation. It should be in clear language that you can understand. And if you can't, pick up the phone, ask them, and they should be able to explain everything to you. You should be working with people who have a strong compliance culture, people who care about your identity and the potential for breaches as much as you do. They should also be working with secure systems and authentication processes, MFA, data encryption. One that's not talked about very frequently is segregation of duties within firms. So we may ask you for your data your demographic information, say. And we have various business lines. We'll do insurance or investments or taxes. And while we may all be operating at some level on that basic information, we are still somewhat siloed for each of those lines of business. And that's a good thing, because if a breach were ever to occur, it would be limited to that silo. This has been mentioned a couple times today, but also ongoing employee training and certification. Make sure that the place you're working with cares and is training their employees, is making them aware of what is actually out there and the types of scams, so that they can stop before they ever get to you. And continuous transaction monitoring. So you're checking your statements, we're checking to make sure that on our end, anything that's coming in sounds like you, we're double checking, we're calling you, making sure it is you. It's important to note that these are not just industry standards or best practices. These are expectations that are actually enforced by our regulators. So I will close with this thought. The Canadian investment industry is considered to be one of the more robust and well-regulated globally, but we're not immune to fraud. The whole system works best when we realize that financial fraud prevention is a shared responsibility. It's kind of a team sport. We, as the firms, we follow the rules. The regulators enforce them. And you, as clients, need to also stay informed and vigilant. Contact us. We will be able to help you, absolutely. Even employ some skepticism, because that can drive really good decision making. When Tier 1 and Tier 2 compliance are functioning properly, issues are caught early, patterns are identified quickly, and clients are better protected. And that's our goal. So thank you again for taking the time today to join us. And I'm going to hand this back over to Kevin.
Sure. Thanks, Holly. I'll try and just tie this together with maybe a few thoughts. So first off, Steve mentioned towards the end of his chat about a third-party company we work with, that sort of adds that extra layer of protection in. So we get to work in the morning. I can't just open my computer, turn it on. I have to open it on. I have to verify, obviously the passwords, everything else, which isn't welcome 123. And, that we have to change frequently. But then it pushes to our phone to verify that's me logging into my computer. So I have to verify that on my phone. And then Adam mentioned that, basically the firm just continues to evolve all of their data checks, all the security measures and stuff that not only they're doing, but that they also, they download on us as well. So about a month ago, they came out with a new rule where basically every system that we get into at head office, whether it's Microsoft, our email, different things that we use during trading systems, all that stuff. Yes, they all require passwords, but now we also have to authenticate every 24 hours on that as well, so it knows it's us in the system and isn't someone else that has somehow hacked into the system. Check verification. This just continues to be an evolving process. Mike mentioned more on the scam side, how to prevent, and I think probably the best advice there he give, the sort of hang up, call someone, do a Google search, sober second thought. And then call back. I mean, I think we've probably all at some point maybe had some level of credit card fraud. It just seems to be something that happens no matter how much you protect your credit card. But that can also be someone calling you. The number looks exactly like it looks on the back of your card because they've spoofed the number. They say they're from the fraud prevention category. Simply say, that's fine, hang up and call the actual number back on the back of your card, and then you'll go through the whole process and you'll actually, discover whether or not that is true or not. Also on that topic, and it didn't come up, is safe words. So Mike mentioned, his mother getting, a phone call that he's in trouble, need money, so on and so forth. And the reason this is topical for me is I did this with my parents about a year ago. We now have one safe word. And what that means is if someone calls my mom or dad, says, Kevin's in trouble, he needs money, whatever the situation might be, her next response is, what's our safe word? And if you have that safe word, with your loved ones, whoever it might be, and I can't come up with that safe word, instantly it's a scam. So there is little kind of techniques around, protection, fraud, all that you can kind of creatively implement on your own. The TCP that Jay talked about, Again, this was one of those things when it came in 4 or 5 years ago. There was a whole consultative process with IROC ahead of time on doing this. And of course, probably the instant thought, and I can't remember exactly what it was back then, is, oh, more information I have to ask from the client, more explanation from my standpoint, more information they should give me, so on and so forth. But I'll tell you, I think since the TCP came in, we have at least once per year found the process very useful where we've actually had to contact the TCP, and it's been uber helpful. So I think probably anyone in my chair is very supportive of the TCP process. And as Jay said, I'm just guessing that probably 95% of our clients do have TCPs on file. We've talked about it every time we're in. We generally talk about it again. But if you don't, then it's certainly something that you should put some good thoughts into. Holly talked a bit about compliance, and compliance sounds like a big scary word, but as she mentioned, compliance is a good defense for you, us, the dealer, to make sure everything's being done appropriately, and it also involves data protection and fraud and different things like that. So I want to thank you all for attending, and just kind of as a closing thought. And I would use the word time friction as being the biggest thing here. This is time friction for everyone involved. It takes time to protect. We may have to ask you a few questions. Sometimes you don't answer. Probably the biggest pushback one is, I want to withdraw for 20 grand, and we have to ask, what's that for? And part of it is the money laundering that Holly talked about, but also for us just to know, your withdrawal patterns, habits, that kind of thing, so that we can help protect you. So my request of you is please be patient with us. We are trying to protect your data and protect your financial well-being. So in that, again, thank you all for attending what ultimately is one of the most important topics that we can talk about in today's world. And if you have any questions at all, just feel free to connect with us directly, or ask us as many questions as you want on this topic, when you're in person, or we're doing a Zoom meeting or a phone meeting as well. So thank you all very much.